You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. I've got to start with Texas Tech, Kansas. By far and away, the best college basketball game that we've gotten this season. I mean, I feel like I've spoken a lot about Texas Tech this year, but the reality is there's a good reason for it. They're a very good team this year. What's been their issue all year? Their lack of offense. Their offense showed up yesterday. To put up 75 points in regulation, to put up 91 points total, I don't care if that's in double overtime or not. That's impressive. They shot 47% from the field. It was a good performance by the Red Raiders. But ultimately, it wasn't enough to beat the Jayhawks. Ochai Agbaji had the game of his life. He put up 37 points. He hit the clutch shot in the first overtime to tie the game at 86. Then in double overtime, his teammates stepped up and ultimately led Kansas to a 94-91 win. Give Christian Braun credit. Give David McCormick credit. Jalen Wilson was solid. This was a great win for the Jayhawks. If you'll recall, on the 8th, the Jayhawks went into Lubbock and lost to Texas Tech, 75-67. It's kind of interesting. For most of this game, it was all Kansas. I mean, they were up by 12 with 9 minutes left. They were up by 8 with under 4 minutes left. They were up by 6 with 2:46 left. It really looked like Kansas was going to win this game in regulation. But Texas Tech just kept storming back. Bryson Williams had an excellent game. He put up 33 points. Kevin Obanor had 17 points. Davion Warren had 15 points. It was a really impressive job by Texas Tech to force overtime. Then, in overtime, the Red Raiders had a 5-point lead with under 90 seconds left. With Texas Tech's defense, that seems like an insurmountable deficit. But Ochai Agbaji hit the biggest shot of his life. A contested 3 over Kevin McCullough. I did not think that shot would go in. I thought the Red Raiders played it perfectly. They switched everything. Kansas didn't get any easy looks. It was just a great shot by Agbaji. Sometimes in basketball, you can have a perfect defensive possession, but a great player can step up and find a way to score regardless. That's what Agbaji did. Then Kansas stepped up in the final 3 minutes as a team. KJ Adams, Jalen Wilson, and Christian Braun stepped up to ultimately lead the Jayhawks to victory. Like I said, this was probably the best game of the season. And that goes for every team in the nation. 2 top 25 teams going at it in a double overtime battle. It doesn't get much better than that. We had great football over the weekend. And we had a great college basketball game on Monday. Doesn't get any better than that. It's kind of funny. Fran Fraschilla said that Texas Tech doesn't deserve to fall in the rankings for losing this game. They're at 13 now. They lost to the 5th-ranked Jayhawks in Kansas. And they took them to double overtime. Fraschilla doesn't think they should fall in the rankings. You know what? I see his point. It's hard to say after that performance that a team like Villanova or USC or OSU or Providence is better than Texas Tech. USC played last night also. They went up against ASU. The Trojans won by 22. What's more impressive? USC beating a bad Sun Devils team by 22 in LA? Or Texas Tech taking Kansas to double overtime in Kansas? The answer is the latter. But the reality is, it's the nature of the beast that if you lose as a ranked team, you're going to slip. It's unfair. I agree with Fraschilla's sentiment 100%. But like I said, it's the nature of the beast. And I will say this. There is something to the logic of if Kansas had lost, they would have fallen in the rankings. So Texas Tech needs to fall for losing this game. And you think about Texas Tech this year. Who are 2 of their 3 best players? Terrence Shannon and Kevin McCullough. Bryson Williams would have been the other acceptable response. But I want to focus on McCullough and Shannon. Those 2 guys combined to shoot 2 for 21 from the field and 0 for 9 from beyond the arc. If either one of them had hit just one more shot, Texas Tech wins this game. The reality is there's nothing wrong for punishing Texas Tech for 2 of their best players not showing up when they really needed them to. If Texas Tech was really deserving of being a top 13 team, Shannon and or McCullough would have hit one more shot. They would have found a way to beat Kansas. They would have found a way to hold on to their late lead in overtime. They would have never let it get to overtime because Shannon would have hit another shot or McCullough would have hit another shot. You want to look for the seminal reason that Texas Tech lost? The seminal reason is that Terrence Shannon and Kevin McCullough no-showed. And it is okay to punish a team for having two of their best players no-show. Fran Fraschiller's sentiment that it's unfair to punish Texas Tech for losing this game may be true on the surface, and I don't begrudge his logic. I really don't begrudge him for saying that. But once you dig a little deeper, and you see that Shannon shot just 1 for 10 from the field and 0 for 5 from beyond the arc, and you realize that McCullough was even worse, 1 for 11 from the field, 0 for 4 from beyond the arc, I think it's okay to punish Texas Tech. I'm not saying you drop them out of the top 25. That would be absurd. But I wouldn't mind them slipping to the 17 range. They're a really good team. There's no question about that. But they lost a game that they should have won. I've got to punish them for that. There are a couple games tonight featuring 2 ranked teams. I'll start with Michigan State versus Illinois. Tom Izzo, once again, has a really good team because, of course, he does. He's Tom Izzo. He's one of the greatest coaches in the history of college basketball. This is a very well-rounded Spartans team. They play good defense. They have a good offense led by guys like Gabe Brown, Max Christie, Marcus Bingham, and Malik Hall off the bench. It's just a well-rounded Spartans team. Meanwhile, you look at Illinois, they're more offense-centric. I'm not saying that their defense is bad. It's not. But their offense is much better than their defense. And I'll give Brad Underwood credit. Got to Illinois in the 17-18 season. Took him a couple years to get going, but now he seems to have found his stride. I mean, if you'll recall, last year, Illinois was ranked 2nd in the final AP poll. Obviously, Gonzaga was the wire-to-wire number 1. But Illinois was a great team last year. Suffered a big upset to Loyola. But they're on their way to doing special things again. Now, Kofi Cockburn is questionable for this game. He has a concussion, or at least concussion-like symptoms. So if he doesn't play, that's going to make Illinois' life very, very difficult. But they do have other good players. Alfonso Plummer transferred from Utah and is having a good season. Trent Frazier's having another good season. Jacob Grandison has stepped up and is having a good year. Andre Curbello's having a good year. He was with Illinois last year. And is a local kid, actually. Went to Long Island Lutheran High School. And went to Illinois. Very interesting. It's kind of tough to make a true pick for this game. Cockburn being out does change the equation a lot, assuming he is out. Even if he plays, he's not going to be at 100%. But Illinois does have more firepower than MSU. Even with Cockburn out. I'll take Plummer, Frazier, Grandison, and Curbelo over Brown, Christie, Bingham, and Hall. The game is in Illinois. I think I'm going to roll with the Illini, but it wouldn't surprise me if MSU won. Like I said, it's very tough to make a tried and true pick on this game when the best player on either team is questionable. Moving on now to Arizona UCLA. Two teams that you probably haven't seen a lot of this year, but I hope you stay up late to watch this game because this is going to be a really, really good game. We've got the third-ranked team in the nation going up against the seventh-ranked team in the nation, and there's going to be nothing on opposite it. So you really have no excuse to not watch this game. I mean, if you have to go to sleep early for work, I totally get it, but if you're up anyway, watch this game. Arizona this year has what it takes to win a national title. You think about guys like Benedict Mathurin, Azuolas Tubelis, Christian Coloco, and Kerr Krissa. Those are four of the best players in the Pac-12. I will say this, though. Tubelis is questionable for this game with an ankle sprain. So that opens up the door for UCLA to pull off the upset. And UCLA obviously knows something about pulling off upsets. They pulled off 3 upsets in Indianapolis last year. They beat BYU, Alabama, and Michigan, and nearly beat Gonzaga in the Final Four. Jalen Suggs with the iconic moment. I mean, the Bruins are entering this game with a clean bill of health. And this is a very experienced team also. Mick Cronin brought back a lot of his guys from last year. Johnny Juzang probably would have been a high pick if he had declared for the draft. He stayed at UCLA and has gotten better. Jules Bernard stayed at UCLA and has gotten better. Jamie Jaquez stayed at UCLA and has gotten better. Tiger Campbell stayed at UCLA and has gotten better. Give Mick Cronin a ton of credit for what he's done for this Bruins program. In a very short period of time, he has turned them into a legitimate threat. Make no mistake about it, UCLA has what it takes to win a national title, just like Arizona does. I mean, this is Tommy Lloyd's first year as a head coach, but it looks like he's going to be around for a very, very long time. This coaching matchup really intrigues me. You have a guy in Cronin who was in the Final Four last year, had no business being there, and you have a guy in Tommy Lloyd who it looks like is going to be in the Final Four a ton throughout his career. That's how great Arizona looks right now. They're 16-1. They were ranked 3rd in the AP poll. Their one loss came against the Volunteers at Knoxville, and they only lost by 4. I'm not going to ding them too much for that loss. But the thing is, though, with Tubelis not being 100% for this game, or worst case scenario, he's out entirely, I don't see how the Wildcats are going to go into LA and beat the Bruins. I'm going to go with the upset here. Give me UCLA. Alright, now I'll give you some NFL Vault talk. The coaching and GM carousel is still spinning. This time, it's the Chicago Bears making a move. They hired Ryan Poles to be their new GM. Poles was previously the executive director of player personnel for the Chiefs, and he's been with the Chiefs since 2009. So this is a guy who has spanned 3 different eras of Chiefs football. The Scott Pioli era, the John Dorsey era, and the Brett Veach era. That means something. New GMs love to bring in their own guys. They really don't like holdovers. For Poles to have lasted with 3 different GMs, that's impressive. It shows that he's a very smart guy. It shows that he has a good head on his shoulders, and funnily enough, he actually was a Chicago Bear. He was an offensive lineman at Boston College. He signed with the Bears as an undrafted free agent in 2008. Didn't make the team. Went back to BC as a graduate assistant. Scott Pioli brought him in when he became Chiefs GM, and he rose up the ranks pretty quickly. I mean, you can't not like this hire if you're a Bears fan. You're hiring someone from the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the best organizations in the league. And it seems like Poles has a really good head on his shoulders. He interviewed for the Panthers job in the last cycle. He interviewed with the Vikings for their open GM job. He was a finalist for the Giants job before they hired Joe Shane. It's clear that he has a good reputation around the league. The thing is, though, was he really the right guy to be getting this interest among Chiefs executives? A couple years ago, when the Jets went 2-14 and they went on the 13-game losing streak to start the season, Nick and I were talking about GM candidates who could come in and replace Joe Douglas. Because if the Jets had gone 0-16, they would have fired Douglas. Alright, there's no way you can keep the GM around who went 0-16. Some people would say that he didn't deserve to stay after going 2-14, but I digress. And this is Nick Warnberger, by the way. You know him, you love him. Big Chiefs fan. Ryan Poles' name did not come up in that conversation. And this is a guy who follows the Chiefs as close as anyone. You know whose name did come up? Mike Borgonzi. Borgonzi is the assistant GM of the Chiefs. So the fact that Nick mentioned Borgonzi but not Poles means something to me. Now I will say this, Borgonzi didn't get an interview in this cycle. I don't know if he got one in the last cycle, but if Nick is gonna endorse Borgonzi and not even mention Poles, that means something to me. Borgonzi should have been the guy. If you wanted someone from the Chiefs organization, hire Borgonzi. not Poles. The thing with Poles is he's been more involved in the scouting element of things than anything else. He hasn't dealt with contracts. He hasn't dealt with roster management. If you're going to hire a GM, that guy should have experience in all aspects of the business. When Mike Maccagnan took over the Jets, he really had no experience with anything outside of scouting. It makes you wonder how Maccagnan was so bad at drafting, but I digress. The point is, he failed miserably with the Jets. Why? Because he was a scout who never should have been a GM. I'm not saying that's Ryan Poles. Alright, from what we've heard about Poles, he's a very smart guy. I know that the Giants loved him. I know that he wowed them in his interviews with them. But part of the reason that they went with Shane is that he has experience in all aspects of football, not just scouting. Poles is really just a scout. Now, I understand that the Chiefs have drafted incredibly recently. Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill. If you want to count Travis Kelce, you can. Mecole Hardman, Byron Pringle, Nick Bolton, Juan Thornhill, Willie Gay, etc., etc. But there's more to being a GM than just drafting well. You've got to know how to negotiate contracts. You've got to be able to manage the roster. The fact that Poles really has no experience with that scares me. I don't want to come off like I'm killing the guy. Alright? He has a great reputation around the league. It's clear he's a smart guy. And the fact that he lasted so long with the Chiefs does mean something. Alright, I do think he'll do a solid job with the Bears. But, if you were gonna hire a Chiefs executive, you should have hired Mike Borgonzi. Hire someone who knows all aspects of football, not just scouting. As a result of Poles taking the Bears job, according to Ian Rappaport of NFL.com, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is in line to be the next GM of the Vikings. Nothing's official yet, but according to Rappaport, that's what all signs are pointing to. Adolfo-Mensah is currently the vice president of football operations for the Browns. Before he got to the Browns, he was on the analytics side of the 49ers. He was involved in football research and development. Before that, he worked on Wall Street. So just to be clear, the Minnesota Vikings are hiring someone with less than a decade of NFL experience to become their new GM. And to make matters worse, someone with a background in analytics. Not player personnel, not scouting, not an assistant GM. Someone who was in football research and development for 7 years. Then he went to the Browns, got a fancy-sounding title. But let's be honest, the Browns are an analytics-based organization. They have Paul DePodesta. They have Andrew Berry. They're very analytics-based. So the Vikings are hiring an analytics guy to be their new GM who a decade ago was on Wall Street. Do I need to tell you how this is going to fail? Or can you see it for yourself? There is no way that this works. What did I just say about polls? You need a background in everything if you want to be an NFL GM, or at least a successful one. Alright, it's okay if you have a primary focus in scouting or roster management or contract negotiations, but you should have your hands in all the pots. Adolfo Mensa doesn't. Adolfo Mensa has none of that. He's just an analytics guy. This is an overcorrection by the Vikings. The Vikings, for a while, were led by Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer. Two people who had been in the NFL for years. And look, with them leading the charge, the Vikings only made it to one NFC title game. They got destroyed by the Eagles, 38-7. Spielman and Zimmer didn't do a bad job. They just didn't do a great job. So look, this happens with teams. You went in one direction with your previous hire. It didn't work out, so you're now pivoting to the opposite direction. Just look at what happened with the Jets. Adam Gase failed miserably, so the Jets hired like his polar opposite in Robert Saleh. I can't think of two more diametrically opposed people than Adam Gase and Robert Saleh. And there's logic to that. There's logic to going in the opposite direction. But there's a limit. Firstly, Spielman and Zimmer did not do a bad job. Not great, but not bad. So you didn't need to burn the forest down. But even then, to hire someone whose sole background is on the analytics side of football is insane. There's a place for analytics in football. Okay? There is no question about that. Pro Football Focus is all advanced analytics. And I cite them on this show all the time. But there's more to football than that. Eye test above everything. This guy has no scouting experience. This guy has no roster management experience. No contract negotiation experience. He may be a smart guy with computers and he may have an analytical mind, but the fact that he's taking over the Vikings is really concerning to me. There's no way this ends well. And another thing, why would you want to hire someone from the Browns organization? Were the Browns in the playoffs this year? No, they weren't. They failed miserably. And it's not like the Niners were great when he was in their front office. He was there from 13 to 19. So 7 years, 2 NFC title game appearances, 1 Super Bowl appearance. Not bad, but not great. There were so many better candidates out there. You could have gone with Monty Ossenfort. You could have gone with John Spytek. You could have gone with Elliott Wolf. Not Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. There's no way that's gonna work. I'm gonna say it right now. Adolfo-Mensah won't make it 3 years as Vikings GM. Someone with only an analytics background cannot run an NFL team. There's a place for analytics. Okay? Football's like the only sport where you can say that. There's no place for it in hockey. Okay, we tried that, it failed miserably. There's no place for it in basketball. They tell you the mid-range shot is dead. All you have to do is watch the Nets. The mid-range shot is not dead. The mid-range shot works. And there's no place for it in baseball. Alright? The Yankees have gone with an analytics-based approach recently. Have they made a World Series recently? No. Have the Athletics made a World Series recently? No. I'm not saying you cast it away entirely in baseball, but don't be beholden to it. You can have some people crunching numbers, but just interpret it as information, not gospel. That's all it is. It's just information. That's the issue with analytics in baseball. People look at it as gospel, and it's not. That's my problem with it. Football, it's okay to rely on analytics. When you're watching football, what do you watch naturally? You watch the quarterback. Maybe you watch to see if he's getting pressured. Maybe you watch the flight of the ball. Maybe you watch the trajectory of it and try to see who he's throwing to, if he's open or not. But the reality is there's more to watching football than that. And that's where analytics comes into play. When you're entranced by the quarterback, analytics will tell you whether the left guard did what he was supposed to do, or whether the opposing middle linebacker did what he was supposed to do. That's football analytics, and it works. Like I said, Pro Football Focus. But think about it this way. You wouldn't want someone who just uses Pro Football Focus and doesn't watch the games to run an NFL team. I'm not saying that Adolfo-Mensah doesn't watch the games, but the fact that he has an analytics background, a finance background, and not a tried and true football background, that concerns me. There's more to football than just numbers. The eye test matters. And it matters in all sports. I do not like this hire. I don't think it's going to work. You get rid of Rick Spielman, a good GM. Rick Spielman's a very good GM. And you bring in Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. I feel sorry for you, Vikings fans. It's going to be tough sledding for a while. In breaking news, and if I had known that this was going to happen sooner, I'd completely redo the show, but it's too late now. The die has been cast. It's okay to do it this way. I would just do it differently if I knew about this previously. Sean Payton is stepping away from the Saints. Now, what does stepping away mean? Does that mean that he's retiring? Or does that mean he's just taking a year off? Only time will tell. I mean, there will be no shortage of teams interested in Sean Payton if he decides he wants to come back. But look, he's been with the Saints since 2006. He's 58 years old. Sometimes in life, you just want to change. I mean, we talk about people like Tom Brady and Bill Belichick not needing to accomplish anything else. Sean Payton doesn't need to accomplish anything else. Sean Payton's a future Hall of Famer. I don't know if we think of him in that way, but he is. He won a Super Bowl, has 152 wins to his name. That's more than Hall of Famers like Bill Cowher and Marv Levy and Tony Dungy. Don't give me the Bounty Gate nonsense, okay? That does not disqualify him from being a Hall of Famer. I mean, you think about the great run that Sean Payton had with the Saints. It's nothing short of incredible. The guy was there for 15 seasons, made the playoffs 9 times. You think about what he did for the city and that franchise after Hurricane Katrina. It's one of the most incredible things in recent NFL history, and it transcends sports. Sports fans in New Orleans really only care about 2 teams. They care about the New Orleans Saints, and they care about the LSU Tigers. They really don't care as much about the Pelicans. So what Payton did in helping lead that team back and leading that urban revitalization can't be overstated. And helping convince Drew Brees to sign with the Saints. Without Brees, there's no Super Bowl. There's no 9 playoff appearances in 15 years. There's none of that. Sean Payton's a future Hall of Famer. Sean Payton has accomplished everything he could ever wish to accomplish with the Saints. Also, think about this. Do you really foresee the Saints being a very good team anytime soon? I don't. I think it's pretty clear that Taysom Hill isn't a starting quarterback. I know it was something that was tried, but he's just a gadget player. He's a fun gadget player. I like watching him play, but that's all he is. He's a gadget player. Is Jameis Winston gonna lead the Saints to the promised land? Probably not. Is Trevor Siemian gonna lead the Saints to the promised land? Definitely not. Alvin Kamara got banged up last year. They're dealing with the whole Michael Thomas thing. Marcus Williams is a free agent. Please, please, please come to the Jets. It's not a good situation in New Orleans. And Payton has earned the right to say, you know what? I don't want to be a part of this. I tried it for 1 year. I had a good season. The Saints did go 9-8. They were in the playoff mix for a little bit. But if Payton sees a major rebuild coming or a big regression coming, he's earned the right to say, you know what, that's it, I'm done. I'll say this, it'll be very interesting to see what Payton does now. Does he go back to Liberty Christian Middle School to coach his son's team? I mean, obviously his son still isn't there, but I think if Sean Payton wanted to go back to Liberty Christian Middle School, the principal would say, yeah, you can come back. You can even be head coach. Payton was actually offensive coordinator, not head coach at Liberty Christian. You gotta love it. He may take some time off to be with his family. He may get into broadcasting. I'll say this. A year from now, we're going to be talking about Sean Payton as the hot head coaching candidate. Just like people wanted Mike McCarthy, they're going to want Sean Payton. Except Sean Payton would actually make sense. I was never a huge Mike McCarthy supporter. Payton, though, just had this ability to elevate subpar rosters to levels that you didn't think was possible. Like, did you really think the Saints would go 9-8 this year? I didn't. 2 years ago, Drew Brees was a shell of his former self. The Saints went 12-4 and won a playoff game. The year before that, when Brees got hurt, Payton was able to guide the ship. Brees missed 5 games that year. Weeks 3 to 7. The Saints won all those games. Sean Payton can go to just about any team and say, I want to be your next head coach. And that team's owner should hand him a blank signed check. Write down whatever number you think is fair and I will pay it. It brings up an interesting question, though. What do the Saints do now? Is a total rebuild in their future? Or are they going to try to make another go at this thing? I'll say this. The Saints are in cap hell right now. And when I say cap hell, that's putting it lightly. At this very moment, according to overthecap.com, the Saints are $74 million over the cap. I didn't even know that was possible. That's another reason why Payton wanted to leave. There's no way that the Saints are good next year. He's earned the right to say, I don't want to be a part of that. I really have no idea what the Saints are going to do. You got to think that Dennis Allen's the favorite, right? I mean, the Saints' defense has been excellent for a while now. Give Allen a ton of credit for that. He was not a good head coach with the Raiders, but I think he's earned a second chance. Pete Carmichael has been with the Saints since 2006. Since Payton's first year. He'd make sense. Aaron Glenn, a former Saint, would make sense. Obviously, you have the usual suspects, guys like Bieniemy, Dable, Eberflus, Bowles, Leftwich, etc., etc. But boy, oh boy, that head coach is going to have his work cut out for him. It's hard to be optimistic about the Saints' future right now. It's not like they have a good roster. They really don't. Sean Payton really elevated that team. Without him, that team's only winning like 5 or 6 games. I'll say this, I think it's in the Saints' best interest to promote from within. I don't think you need to go outside the organization. I mean, you would have brought Payton back, right? So why would you get rid of his system? You can elevate Carmichael, you can elevate Allen. You want to go with Aaron Glenn? I'm fine with that. He was with the Saints before he went to the Lions as their defensive coordinator. Glenn was the Saints' defensive backs coach. Any one of those 3 guys would work, but I don't think you want to go too outside the organization. But I will say this. It's going to be very tough sledding for that next head coach. I feel sorry for you, Saints fans. I didn't believe the rumors. I did not think he would leave. It makes sense. He's earned the right to go out on his terms. If he says, you know what, I don't see this roster as doing anything, I don't want to impact my legacy, I want out, he's earned that right. And like I said, every team in the NFL is going to line up to sign him next year. I'll be interested to see what he does. It wouldn't surprise me if he said, no, I'm done. I spent my whole life in football and now I want to spend some time with my family. That wouldn't stun me. But if a guy like Jerry Jones said to Payton, hey, I want you as my next head coach, here's a check for a ton of money, yeah, he'd go to Dallas. If Andy Reid decides to retire after next season, he'd go to Kansas City. You know that Payton's going to go to an already great team if he decides he wants to coach again. He'll have no interest in a rebuild. It's either head coach of a great NFL team or I will sit on my front porch with a fruit drink with an umbrella in it. Meanwhile, Saints fans may end up doing that after watching the first game of their team next year. I feel bad for you, Saints fans. It's going to be really tough sledding ahead of you. I'll close this show out with some NHL Vault talk. And I'll start with Stars Flyers. The Stars beat the Flyers 3-1. And two big streaks were tied in that game. Keith Yandel tied the NHL record for consecutive games played with 964. Tonight, he is set to break Doug Jarvis's record. And the Flyers lost their 12th straight game. That is a winless streak that they haven't had since the 98-99 season. Back then, there were ties. No ties anymore, thankfully. The funny thing about that 98-99 team, that team actually rallied to make the playoffs. They lost in 6 games to the Maple Leafs in the first round, but they did make the playoffs. The Flyers aren't making the playoffs this year. And I sincerely hope that they lose their 13th straight game tonight. Not just because they're the Flyers and I hate the Flyers, but because they are playing the Islanders tonight. How great would it be for the Islanders to be the team that sets the record for most winless games consecutively in Flyers history? That would be great. I would love everything about that. And it's kind of interesting. With a win tonight, and assuming the Devils lose in regulation tonight against the Stars, the Islanders will move to 6th in the Metropolitan Division. Not a great place to be, but it's better than last. The Islanders are tied for last right now. I don't care about games in hand. They're tied for last. That's all I care about. Look, it is tough to be optimistic about the Flyers. You watch them play, I mean, it is really bad. I'll say this, it's clear as day that it really wasn't Alain Vigneault's fault. Mike Yao has done a lot worse. I mean, I never thought that this was Vigneault's fault. Did he do a great job with the Flyers? The answer is no, but he is a very good coach. Look, the Flyers really don't have a ton of talent. Carter Hart is good, but he's not great. Claude Giroux's having a really good season. Cam Atkinson's having a really good season. Travis Konechny's having a really good season. But that's it. Joel Farabee's hurt right now. Sean Couturier has been solid, but not great. James Van Riemsdyk is disappointed. Ivan Provorov hasn't set the world on fire. The Flyers just don't have a lot of talent. They have big names, but they're just undisciplined. Their offense struggles to get pucks on net. Their defense allows a ton of shots. It's tough to be optimistic about the Flyers right now. Do you see a light at the end of the tunnel in Philly? I don't. I mean, the Flyers made a move today. They hired John Torchetti as an assistant coach. All due respect to John Torchetti. Alright, he's been in hockey for an incredibly long time. He's coached everywhere. Has a good head on his shoulders. But to bring him in and say he's gonna help us right the ship? That's just comical. Here's the thing. In 2016, Chuck Fletcher, who was the Wild's GM at that point, fired Mike Yao as Wild head coach. He replaced Yao with Torchetti, who was coaching the Iowa Wild of the AHL. Think about where all those guys are now. They're in Philly. At this very moment, Chuck Fletcher is the Flyers GM. Yao is their head coach, and he's going to stay that way for the rest of the season. And Torchetti's now an assistant coach. That is just comical. I mean, I like Chuck Fletcher. I like his aggressiveness. But it's pretty bad when you fire a head coach, promote a guy who you knew from your time with the Wild to replace him, really didn't do a good job with the Wild. They underachieved every year. And now you're bringing in the former interim head coach of the Wild to be an assistant. That's just not a good look. It reeks of nepotism. It reeks of Fletcher just surrounding himself with people that he's familiar with and not people that are really capable of righting the ship. Look, I'd be surprised if Fletcher made it past this season. If the Flyers continue on this trajectory and they finish last in the Met, I don't see how he survives. I mean, maybe you didn't think the Flyers would be a great team this year, but did you think they'd be this bad? I certainly didn't. And that's on Fletcher, someone who has had a really bad run with the Flyers, had a good run with the Wild, had some success, brought in some big names, but now it's Wild 2.0. It's just not going to work. This setup isn't going to work. Fletcher needs to go at the end of the season. Yao needs to go at the end of the season. Just blow everything up. I understand not wanting to do that now. I understand that nothing now is going to change the Flyers for this year, but I really hope for the Flyers' sake they blow everything up at the end of the season. As an Islanders fan, though, please, please, please keep everyone around. because I hate the Flyers. They're my second least favorite team. I hate the Rangers most of all. Speaking of the Wild, they destroyed the Canadiens 8-2 yesterday. They tied a franchise record for most goals in a game. They're playing really good hockey right now. They're 6-2-2 in their last 10. They've won their last 3. They are firmly in the playoffs. I'm not sure how good they're going to be once they get into the playoffs, because their goaltending isn't that great. Cam Talbot's not having a great season. The Wild are all offense, no defense. You need a great goalie if you're going to win in the playoffs. The Wild don't have that. They're a good team, they'll make the playoffs, but I don't see them making a ton of noise once they get there. But the real story here is the Canadiens. Did anyone expect them to fall off a cliff the way that they've fallen off a cliff this year? They're the worst team in the NHL right now. I'm not kidding. They have the fewest points among every team in the NHL. This is a team that last year was in the Stanley Cup Finals. They rallied from 3-1 down to beat their arch rivals, the Maple Leafs, in the first round. They won 2 games in overtime. They destroyed the Jets in the second round. They upset the Golden Knights in the penultimate round. Dominic Ducharme came in and looked like the second coming of Scotty Bowman. Now their offense is non-existent. Their defense is non-existent. I understand that they don't have Carey Price. He's dealing with a knee injury and he took some time off to deal with his mental health. I totally get all that. And I'm not begrudging Price at all for anything. And if I were to tell you that Price would be out for the first 3 months of the season or so, you'd tell me that the Canadiens would be a really bad team. But this bad? I don't think anyone saw this coming. Jake Allen has been useless. Sam Montembeault has been useless. Caden Primo hasn't exactly set the world on fire. And the thing is, Price's absence doesn't explain the Canadiens' struggles on offense. Their leading point man is Nick Suzuki. He has 24 points. The Canadiens have played 42 games this year. So Suzuki's getting a point every other game. No Canadian has 9 goals this year. Suzuki and Josh Anderson are tied for the team lead with 8. You knew the Canadiens would be bad without Price. That's not the story. The story is how bad they've been. Their performance this year has been inexcusable. Let me tell you, if Ducharme didn't make it all the way to the Cup Finals last year, he'd be gone right now. I mean, let's put it this way. There's a reason that the Canadiens recently overhauled their front office. Mark Bergevin was fired a couple months ago. Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes are now leading the Habs. I'll say this, it wouldn't surprise me if Ducharme was fired after the season. He'd have been fired already, but like I said, he led the Habs to the Cup Finals in his first year in the NHL. That buys him a full season. But I don't know what's going to save his job. I don't know if there's anything that can save his job. I'll say this, I think Ducharme will get another shot if the Habs decide to move on from him. That is something that you need to consider. It's not a great look when you fire someone and then that guy immediately gets another chance to be a head coach. But things need to change in Montreal. They need to bring Carey Price back yesterday, and they need to add some more firepower on offense. I expect the Habs to be very aggressive in the offseason in adding talent. And when I say talent, I mean at the head coach position and to their roster. Tomorrow, I'm going to break down the Baseball Hall of Fame results. We'll know who's getting in at 6 p.m. tonight. I love Hall of Faming. It's one of my favorite things. I look forward to this every year. Until then, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.